Hello, welcome to the final roster breakdown video of this series. We are on to our final team, the Surrey 89ers. The Niners come into the season with, again, not a lot to prove. Very much seen as the underdogs. We've kind of work out their kind of financial position. They did really well last year. Probably one of the most exciting teams to watch. Had a great head-to-head with the London Lions, for example. And Louis, this looks like a team that, again, can definitely upset and push above.
Definitely so. I mean, they have some really interesting players they brought in, players that who I wouldn't really expect coming into like Surrey, really. Guys like Isiah Small coming from a Svendborg team that upset Bakken, for instance, in the Danish league. Guys like Kino Lilly coming out of Summer League. Yeah. I mean, when was the last time we saw players like that go to Guildford?
So let's get straight in. There's a lot of different angles I want us to try and get over in this video. But let's start with Kino Lilly.
Yeah. So combo guards, I think he's more so leading like a 2. Main attribute is his shooting. Excellent shooter. Brilliant at a thing that I like to compare him to is kind of like Steph Curry. Obviously not as good a player, but his thing is Steph Curry's value is kind of more so as an off-ball guy, relocating into threes, being really shifty in terms of kind of moving off screens, handoff, stuff like that. He's really slippery and difficult to kind of get a hold of, really, because he moves so well off of, screens and stuff like that. In terms of like extended range, he's got extended distance on his threes. He has a decent handle to pull up game. So they like to run like pick and roll with quick pick and roll with him, where he can kind of dribble off that, pull up, free mid range. In terms of playmaking off of that, he's at decent, but as I kind of want to mention, I think a kind of issue with Surrey, so far from what I've seen, because I've seen them in Portugal and faced against Reading Rockets. I think a kind of issue was him and Ronald Polite, because Ronald Polite hasn't looked too great. I think Kino Lilly having to handle the ball where he isn't as apt, he isn't as strong as a handler per se in terms of creating his own shot because of his smaller frame, because he's 6 foot. Yep. It makes it really difficult for him to kind of get enough space, because in terms of him versus Jalen Ray's much more shifty of a handle, I think, in terms of creating in the mid range and creating off the dribble, whereas Kino's more of a simpler kind of pull up game versus Jalen. So that's more difficult for him to create in terms of getting to the rim. That's non-existent. So that poses a challenge, and obviously his playmaking is not as good. So Ronald Polite's kind of issues so far kind of exacerbate that issue. Defensively, he's, smaller frame. So think about Jalen Ray. He's not very effective, frankly, in terms of steals, etc. So that's basically him in a nutshell, I think.
Superb. I like that. So let's go on to his partner. You've said about you're not sure of Ronald Polite yet. 6'2" guard. I know you've kind of put you see Polite more as the 1. But I can just see those guys being so interchangeable game to game.
Yeah, so Ronald Polite is a ball handling 1. In terms of his off ball value, in terms of shooting, etc. He shot 45% at UNCG. He shot 45% from 3 at UNCG on very limited volume. So he's kind of like an apprehensive shooter that wants to slash the basket, really. So that 45% is kind of a fake number. Potentially, maybe Lloyd thought he was getting a shooter. I doubt it, because they did their due diligence, but he's not too good a shooter. But basically, he wants to get to the rim. In terms of mid-range, 3-point off the dribble, think a guy think Larry Austin. In terms of his 3-point and mid-range kind of reluctance and inefficiency, or his lack of anything there. So he wants to get to the rim. He's good at he's really slippery in terms of getting into driving angles, and really good at kicking out. So there were a couple nice plays against in Portugal where he, kicks out to a shooter, and that's kind of the value what Surrey wants, him driving into the paint and kicking out. So that's that. In terms of guarding, defense, that's another part of his value, because obviously he's a bigger guard, I think 6'2", probably about 190 pounds to like near 200 probably. He's pretty physical, pretty big. I didn't really like too much of what I saw in Portugal. Quite frankly, it looked a little bit undisciplined, but he is a versatile guard that can guard up, I think, and decently well against wings. Potentially, fight on the mismatch against bigs, potentially. But that's his thing. Try to get to the rim, kick out. Good playmaker in that sense.
Let's move on. And I want to come back to Kuntz in a minute. But when we look at Nedas Chalavinskas, this is a big season for Nedas. Like when you look at, everyone remembers the game against Leicester last year to take Surrey into the final. That they did really well to get to and played really well against the Sharks. But then a lot's expected of Nedas this season to contribute. I feel like you look at how he was very much up and down last season, and then he seemed to struggle for GB in the summer. But what do you expect to see from Nedas, or hope to see from Nedas this summer?
So I hope to see, because in this roster construction, they obviously need quite a bit from Nedas, to be perfectly frank. They need Nedas to kind of produce a little bit more than last season. But a thing that I would like to see is potentially, is off-ball shooting. He needs to be knocking down his shots. And in Portugal, that looks a little bit more so like Eurobasket, where he kind of struggled. That's the bedrock of where he will be valuable. We know he's, willing to shoot. He's got a quick trigger, he just needs to be consistent in hitting that shot. So there's that. An additional thing is we see, he can, handle the ball in the pick and roll, kind of. That was kind of a decent thing that we saw last season, where he was able to, kind of pressure the rim downhill in the pick and roll, and kind of he made a couple of nice passes out of the pick and roll, which is surprising, for Surrey to kind of potentially play above what I think they've recruited. Nedas if Nedas can kind of create off the dribble, more so than what he did last season, or that would be a big boost to them. One underrated thing is his kind of physicality defensively, because he's like 6'5" or 6'6", but he is pretty physical. That Baltic energy, Baltic physicality, which means that in terms of like his versatility, I suppose. Obviously, he's not the most athletic person in the world. I think he'd even admit that. But it kind of, I don't know, it could be used, effectively in some sense. So, there's that.
So we have, let's look in a similar position. Kareem Queeley back in. He missed a full season at the Lions. Missed a full season after being at the Lions. Big, bad injury. Seems to have been just, over the last few seasons, really inconsistent because of injuries. This is a big opportunity for him to earn court time to get back into and really show what Kareem Queeley was meant to be as that kind of hot prospect.
Yeah, like he was a major prospect, man. He was at Real Madrid, So obviously, Lloyd's trying to tap into that. We see in Portugal, you see his defensive value. He's picking up against the point guards at the point of attack, picking up, near enough full court. He's physically, like, he's huge, man. Like, in terms of his, physique, like, physicality at that guard spot, that's really valuable. It really can deter opposing guards. And, think about some of the smaller guys in our league, and the fact that Surrey don't really have too many positive defenders. I think it's fair to say that's where the value of Kareem is. His issue has always been his shot, in terms of shooting off ball, in terms of kind of his pull up in the mid range, because he does kind of like to shoot that. In terms of his handle, he's obviously quick, relatively quick downhill, but he hasn't really got that massively value adding kind of the handle to create rim looks. So he kind of needs that intermediary, and he doesn't really hit that at any good clip. if that if that ramble makes sense. But that's kind of the thing that is his. That's the kind of thing that needs to catch up his offense. Lloyd kind of used him as a ball handler quite a lot, and I think that's really valuable considering Kino Lilly's not, and if Andrew Lawrence is kind of injured during the season, because that unfortunately tends to happen quite frequently. I think
he played in more games last season than he played in a few seasons. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
He did still get injured, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt. So that would be valuable, I think. So that's kind of that ball handling wing, additional like defender. That's where his value lies. So yes.
Right, let's go talk about Owen Kuntz. I feel when I look at Owen Kuntz, he reminds me of Will Yoakum from the Bristol Flyers. Is that fair?
No.
No, why not?
No.
An athletic guy that likes to get to the basket.
Nah. Will Yoakum's all rims and threes. Owen Kuntz is much more physical than bloody Will Yoakum. Will Yoakum's skinnier. But anyway, like Owen Kuntz is obviously a very good shooter, like Will Yoakum. Very good shooter, can shoot off the dribble too, which is a big plus. At Cal Poly, which was an extremely interesting team, like they played Owen Kuntz at the 5 spot. I watched a film where Owen Kuntz was guarding in the post against Bent something and another. It's a very funny name, but he's a German center that just signed in the BBL. So there's that. He guarded against a 7-footer in the post. Not very well, but he had to do that. He's physical, I think he's like a 3-4. I think he's probably they probably touted him as kind of a swing man, but I think he's more of a 3-4 considering potentially like a lack of lateral quickness in terms of guarding at the 2 spot, I think. And I think that was kind of exploited against Reading, where they played a lot of 3-guard lineups and they kind of exploited that. But, he's a good, he's kind of a decent additional ball handler, kind of in the secondary pick and roll in terms of, getting to his shot, decent at kind of passing. But it's so off the catch, he's not too good at kind of generating, because he's not as quick as like a Will Yoakum. So if you're thinking about off the catch value, he's not as kind of quick as a slasher. It's more so his physicality, which aids him as a slasher. But he's like a good shooter.
I still think he's a wee bit Will Yoakum, but hey ho.
I don't agree, but go on.
That's just the video I watched. I mean, you know what? He looks like someone that we've already watched this season, but yeah.
Good highlight tape.
Great highlight tape. We've said
Great
that.
Highlight tape.
All right, let's move on to some of the bigs. And let's be honest, the bigs for Surrey last season, when you look at Dame Adelakin and then Mervyn James as well, like, it's going to take a lot to replace those guys because of the impact they had across the whole league. Let's be honest. Both of them were, Mervyn James was leading scorer and Dame Adelakin was leading rebounder, for example. Like, that's big shoes to fill. So let's look at Isiah Small first. He obviously played 6'8", played in Svendborg last year in Denmark.
Yeah, I love kind of the pickup of Isiah Small. Like I said, Svendborg upset back in last season, who are perennially like the powerhouses in Denmark, which was very impressive. They had the best defense in Denmark, and Isiah Small was a big part of that. He's exceptionally long as a 4-man, exceptionally long in terms of generating defensive plays, in terms of steals and blocks. He's great at it. Really smart player that kind of comes off, like strikes the page, when you watch him, really smart player. Really gets his length kind of in the way of passing lanes, like blocks, really timely on blocks, etc. Versatile in terms of mobility and lateral quickness, etc. Versatile defender. In terms of his offensive game, his whole thing, I heard some people comparing him to Mervyn. That's definitely not the case, I don't think. His value is more so being a really smart cutter, excellent finisher at the rim, excellent finisher at the basket. can score a little bit out of the post, but mainly more so kind of like a cutter, struggles as a shooter. So I think potentially kind of a good way to kind of look at him would potentially be like a Zach Irvin type, maybe, in terms of kind of offensive kind of role. Maybe not, how he looks or, well, I mean, Zach Irvin sometimes guards at the one spot. You probably wouldn't see Isiah Small do that. But in terms of his offensive role, in terms of like a non-shooting four, that's more so looking to cut to the basket rather than, be a shooter. I kind of think that was kind of an issue in Portugal where, they have a guy like Ronald Polite who's very rim dependent, and they have Isiah Small who can't really shoot. So that was kind of an issue. But also, I didn't mention this, but his passing as well really he's an excellent connective passer. So what I mean by that is like catch pass, quick, like connective passes out to shooters, etc. Really, really good at that. He's more so like a really valuable complementary player than like a main cog per se. So that's really him, I think.
All right, let's look at Michael Graham. He played at Hofstad, first year rookie pro. What should we expect to see from him?
Yeah, so 5-man, obviously, excellent rebounder, offensive rebounder, very physical in terms of that and grabbing, rebounds. He had a really impressive rebound where he just like tipped over a guy and just grabbed it, uses physicality in the boards. In terms of elsewhere, he's more like a low usage kind of like rim rolling big that kind of finishes acceptably well, but not too varied a skill set in terms of scoring out the post. I really wouldn't expect much in terms of that. He did play out some handoff stuff in Portugal, but he's not really a value-adding passer. In terms of defense, he's again, he's a physical guy. We'll touch on, I don't know whether you want to touch on him, but Hayden Ling, Hayden Ling is more mobile. He's more mobile versus Hayden Ling, so there's the dynamic between the two. But he's a decent rim protector as well, with decent verticality and stuff like that. But I think, him versus Hayden Ling will be a really interesting topic of conversation. So,
hey, let's talk about him then. And do you want to know what? Surrey have done something really interesting this summer. They've brought in a player on loan, and they've allowed Dejani to go out on loan. Like, that's not something we see a lot of times happening in British basketball. Or it maybe does, but we don't hear about it, or it's not really called a loan situation. But I'm all for it.
Yeah, man. It's cool. It's cool, man. It's the Dan Clark Spanish connection, Being smart.
Absolutely.
Being smart with it. But do you want me to talk about Hayden Ling?
Let's go for it.
Let's go for it. Okay, so I think he's going to be really, really exciting. Exceptionally gifted player. Like, there were a couple plays he had in Portugal where I was like, damn. Like, some of the blocks he got at the rim were insane because he's obviously 7'1" with but he's not one of those like lumbering 7-footers, and obviously that's why Zaragoza signed him. He's very I think it's fair to say he's very functional for his size.
Absolutely.
And kind of a little bit quick twitch, and he's not a massive vertical guy, but he's quick in terms of getting off the ground and kind of getting blocks. He'll make some crazy plays this season. In terms of rebounding, like in Spanish EBA, which is the fourth tier, I think he averaged something crazy like 22 rebounds per 40 or something ridiculous. No, because he's huge. He just rebounds over guys. Like in Portugal, he did the same. Like, he's a huge rebounder.
And that's something we don't have that many big bigs this year. We said in a previous recording, I don't know if it was in a YouTube series or in the podcast, the league feels bigger, but there's just a lot of kind of 6'9" guys.
Yeah. Surrey have, yeah.
We've got, you've got Big Kevin Allen, who's just a wide body, but not necessarily, he's obviously not athletic, whereas Hayden Ling's 7 foot with a massive wingspan.
Yeah. honestly, I think if they kind of unlock him, I think that could massively change their season. Honestly, like there was a play against Reading where he made like a really quick twitch, like pass with his hands. I was like, 7-footers don't usually do that, you know. Obviously, in terms of his mobility as a 7-footer guarding out on the perimeter, that's more of an issue.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, he's still not too bad, but obviously, you know, it's fine margins at this level, you know, so he'll be pretty much exploitable, even though, you know, like we saw it against Matt Nicholson. You know, Matt Nicholson's a good mover for his size, but even against Cheshire, they could exploit it. But yeah, and in terms of finishing, he's aggressive to the rim. He's not, I mean, I hate to say it, but Theo Hughes last season, my big complaint like of him was kind of his physicality in finishing at the rim. Like he tended to kind of shy away from contact, but kind of Hayden Ling does go into contact. You know, he's physical with it. So yeah, I think he's got more scoring upside than Michael Graham in terms of his post scoring. So I think that'll be a question to whether he starts by the end of the season.
Is that do you see that as being the potential path for him? That was my next question. Like, you know what? We'll start in there. Let's bring up the depth chart, and then let's start with that question being the first one. Obviously, we've got Graham starting, but as you say, Hayden Ling, there's a lot of upside to the guy. So, are we going to see a situation where, as the season goes on, maybe Graham starts, Ling just gets a bigger contribution off the bench, or what do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, Graham's going to start at the start of the season. I mean, that's kind of obvious, but I really do think that's kind of like it's a possibility by the end of the season. I really do think. I think he's just too talented to kind of keep him off the floor and too impactful. I think, you know, in terms of kind of boosting that starting lineup too, you know, because you have to think of basketball as, you know, lineups and units. I think he'd be too good to ignore by the end of the season. So,
I mean, we can't go wrong with that, and that's one to watch. And you know what? It's good to see a young British kid going across the continent, coming back, and almost like excelling. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, he's getting an opportunity to get some good minutes. Really curious to see how Dejani does in BCB. That's going to be fun to see. But let's look at the opposite age of the scales. When you look at this team in terms of age group, you look at, and this is more obviously than opinion based. When we look at Andrew Lawrence and Teo Gandengbe, like you're talking about two stalwart guys that have been around a long, long time. Teo's obviously gone from being the guy who was the athletic dunker back in the day to now he's just got this absolute great corner three, all of a sudden able to guard the 4 and the 5. I would never have said that when he played for the Rocks, for example. But we also then see Andrew Lawrence, when he checks into the game, just brings that calm that young, youthful guys just really need. So that it's, in my opinion, this roster's got another great blend of that youthfulness, but also that experience.
Yeah, I kind of think they're going to have to rely on Andrew and Teo quite a bit this season, to be perfectly honest. Like, because I've mentioned the deficiency at the 4 spot with Isiah Small not being able to shoot. I mean, if you want someone at the 4 spot that can shoot, I mean, the only option is Teo, unless, you know, Tim Nwankwo kind of comes good this season, which might be difficult. But yeah, that's kind of the only option, you know. So in terms of like roster construction, you know, there's a big onus on kind of Teo to be able to perform and be available. You know, otherwise you're gonna have to, I don't know, play up Nedas at the 4 or something, or play Owen at the 4, do some weird stuff. And then obviously Andrew Lawrence, I talked about, you know, Ron Polite kind of struggle in Portugal. You know, I don't really like lineups with Kino Lilly handling too much, to be perfectly honest. I think he's better off ball. So yeah, I think there's quite a reliance on those two to kind of perform and be available.
Is that maybe what we're lacking across the league this year? Some like proper true ones? It's like a dying art.
I mean,
Almost.
that's the answer for every season, really. We always sign
true.
just combo cards.
That's true.
But that's a good point, because this season we've seen guys recruited like Joe Anderson. Joe Anderson's more of a passer.
Yeah,
But we've seen guys like PJ Smith, for example, and Jordan Johnson. We haven't really seen guys like, I don't know, like a guy like Larry Austin kind of signed, a guy like Ron Polite. We don't see many like rim pressure guards or guys like Andrew Lawrence who are more smart with kind of their pick and roll kind of offense. So yeah, I think we've kind of seen some really interesting kind of recruitment trends this season. So
absolutely. All right, as usual for final one, who is your prophecies one to watch on the Surrey 89ers?
I mean, the guy who's going to get the most points is Kino Lilly, so I'll go for him.
Perfect. Kino Lilly, they're definitely the one to watch from the Surrey 89ers. It'll be interesting to see if the Niners can follow up last season, making the playoffs. Can they push up the way? It's definitely going to be one to watch. Definitely some good talent there. I think they're going to be a team that will be difficult to win at home. Sorry, difficult to win. They'll play well at home. They'll be difficult to beat at home. But could struggle on the road.
Yes, that's the Surrey way. So
absolutely,
SSB.
Absolutely. All right, this has been our final roster breakdown. Hopefully, everyone's found those interesting. Please get involved. Like, share, subscribe, follow us across all those different platforms. We are on them. I think we're on most of them. We might not be on them all. Follow Louis on social media, stuff on British players and the leagues. Awesome. So definitely give him a follow as well. So thank you for watching these. We'll definitely get some more stuff on the YouTube channel very soon with some interviews and whatnot as well. So again, thanks very much for watching these.